At this moment in time, the number one challenge or issue that's creating fear, anxiety, division is this whole idea of how do we discern the truth.
Tom Ziglar, CEO of Ziglar Corporation and son of Zig Ziglar, carries his father's legacy forward.
He translates timeless principles into today's chaotic reality of AI, remote work, and digital noise, anchoring success in character, relationships, and purpose, where machines can't compete.
The change, the disruption is happening now at an intensity and a frequency that we've never seen before. But the basic principles still happen the same. There are three things that AI will never do. First off, AI will never. The second is AI will never have wisdom. It'll have a lot of knowledge, a lot of data. But when you think of wisdom, wisdom is experience and knowledge applied through virtue, right? It's the virtues that guide us. And the third one is really, to me, the biggest one of all.
What's one modern challenge you see brands facing that Zig's approach can still solve?
All these virtues and values that we just talked about and the importance of relationship and character and integrity, that's what we've been doing for 60 plus years. So that never changes. And what's interesting is if you look at the consequences of this highly noisy AI-driven world, what you see is...
Welkom bij de Storybrand podcast, waar wij geloven, if you confuse, you lose. Ruis in je communicatie is je grootste vijand. En het creëren van een duidelijke boodschap is de sleutel om je bedrijf te laten groeien. Dit is de Storybrand podcast.
Kicking things off, Tom, your dad's legacy. When I think about the legacy, it's synonymous with motivation, right? And behavior change. Now, growing up as the son of Zig Ziglar, what is one moment from your childhood where you saw the real Zig, not the stage icon, living out his principles in a way that surprised or shaped you?
Yeah, Donna, it's so great to be here. I really saw it over and over again all through my childhood and growing up, and it was how my father just treated ordinary people and how he gave respect and kindness to whoever he came across. The memory that I have that just keeps resonating is when I was growing up, we would go to a place called Luby's Cafeteria, and in Texas, where I live and where I grew up. A cafeteria is just a restaurant where you go in and you go down the line and you have this tray, and then the people on the serving side ask you what you want, and then they put the food on it. And as you go down that line, and so the people who work there are usually minimum wage, they're not highly skilled, typical waiter, waitress type person. And when we would go down that line, Dad would give a motivational speech to every person who was serving. And it was short. He knew their name. He asked about their family. He encouraged them. And so the funny thing is while they're serving him, he's motivating them and they're filling his plate up with food, right? And so he would literally have to say, "That's enough, that's enough." And then when we'd walk in to to Luby's, Mom would go straight over and hug the cashier because at that you paid on your way out, and then she would hug the lady who would serve the drinks on a cart. She would walk around the seating area, and so I've had so many people who witnessed that through the years come to me and say, it was so good to see how your mom and dad treated everybody.
Wow.
And that really is it. That same, another story around that is Dad would go and speak for these corporations, and he would do the keynote, and there would be a lot of times a dinner or a banquet before he would speak. And so you'd have, 2,000 people, 1,000 people eating in this room, in a banquet tables of 10 or 12. And they would typically, a plated meal, and then they would bring out a dessert. And a lot of times in a hotel, the dessert would be a little ice cream sundae, which meant it'd be a scoop of ice cream, maybe a cherry, maybe a little bit of whipped cream, kind of puny. And when Dad would get his, like one time he got his, and his had 3 scoops of ice cream. It had a massive amount of whipped cream. It had all kinds of nuts and fruit and cherries around it. And and he's at the head table, right? So he's there with the CEO and the executives of that company. And one of them looks over and says, "Zig, how did you get such a big dessert? Yours is like 3 times as big as the rest of ours." And Dad said it was embarrassing. It was like gargantuan in comparison. And he said, "Oh, well, Shirley's such a nice lady, the person who's serving us." And the CEO said, "Shirley, do you know Shirley?" And he said, "No, I just met her tonight, but she's got 3 kids and she's working this job to help pay for college for one of her kids."
Wow.
And so that's really when you talk about leadership or setting an example, or you can say impressive things from the stage, and there's a lot of great speakers who do that. But what's more impressive is if how you live exceeds what you say.
Yeah. Very
And
powerful.
so that was to me the realness and the trueness of Dad. I mean, that's just who he was.
Yeah. So what I hear you say, and we've spent quite some time together in 2016 when you were here for a week in the Netherlands speaking. And of course, we saw each other a couple of times in the events with Howard Partridge. What I really am impressed about, again, when you tell me these stories about your father, is that there was really no difference between him on a stage and being at home with you and the family, right? It's really about the character, the integrity. Is this something that you feel is the key, has been really the key of your father for 4 decades, filling the biggest stadiums in the US, speaking worldwide, being such an incredible speaker and author? Because we don't we all know that it's easy to stand on stage, but it's hard to live a life that really resonates with the message, right? The messenger and the message being one. How do you look at this?
Yeah, I 100% believe that was the key to his long-term success.
Mm,
Uh, he was anchored in humility. And if you read his own autobiography and his stories, he struggled from the time he was born until he was 46. Professionally, if he had success, it was always for a short period of time. He was always changing. He was always looking for the next thing. And then when his faith became his primary focus, when he was 46, his purpose changed,
mm,
right? He didn't want to be just successful. He wanted to serve a higher calling. And that humility that said, you know what, I've worked as hard as I could my whole life and I got nothing.
mm-hmm.
And then when he changed his higher purpose, his higher calling around his faith, still the same message, but for a different reason. That's when his career took off. That's when his success really came. And so every time he would start to kind of go to that next level, he would just break down in gratitude for understanding where he was before.
Mm,
And so that humility really was a huge thing in his life. And when you see people who reach the pinnacle and then fall from that, it's usually pride and arrogance.
Mm.
It's usually a belief that the rules don't apply to me anymore, that
Yeah.
I'm entitled and I get to do things that other people don't.
Ooh, yeah.
And then they lose the connection. When Dad passed away, we made a Facebook post, and the Facebook post just announced that he had died, and we had 12,000 comments on that post, and that was 13 years ago. And the comments weren't, short. They weren't like rest in peace. They were long. And the comment would go, thousands of them would said the same thing. They said, I first heard Zig Ziglar in 1982 and 1994. They would list the date. And then they would say, I was in a room of 10,000 or 5,000 or 20,000. And then they would say, and I waited in line to get his autograph, to meet him for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. And then they would say, and when I spoke to him, even though it was less than a minute, it felt like I was the only person in the room.
Wow.
And so his ability to maintain that level of excellence and impact, it was like people, they wanted to believe what he said from the stage, but their one-on-one encounter with him was the confirmation that it was actually true.
Yeah.
And so what I tell anybody who's a leader or a speaker, especially speakers, I say, none of us can be Zig Ziglar on stage, because there's only one, right? If you watch him and you listen to him and you see his genius of putting things together and making difficult things so simple and resonating with the mind and the heart, so that action follows. And if you don't have any action, there's no change that takes place, right? You can't just think the things into existence. You got to think it and then do it. And so I tell them none of us can be Zig Ziglar on stage, but all of us can be Zig Ziglar one-on-one.
Yeah.
Right. And so that is just really caring for that person that God put in front of you.
Yeah.
Listening to them, hearing them, recognizing them, meeting them where they were.
Very powerful.
Yeah.
So, you are now the head of the Ziglar Corporation. It has been a beacon for over 50 years, helping people and businesses win through what you just mentioned, profoundly simple principles. As the CEO, how do you adapt your father's timeless teachings like goal setting, positive thinking, to a world of AI, remote work, digital noise? What's one modern challenge you see brands facing that Zig's approach can still solve?
Yeah. So our whole business is based on timeless wisdom. And so one of the ways something is wisdom is the older it is, the more likely it's true, because it wouldn't stand the test of time. And so now we live in this new world of, I'm going to say a new world, but we're always entering into a new world. But the disruption is happening now at an intensity and a frequency that we've never seen before. Remote work or AI, and of course I love AI and I use it to serve me and to give me more time. But the basic principles still happen the same. And so here's what I would tell you, and this is one of the things that when I speak to leadership groups around the world that I talk about, and that is that there are three things that AI will never do. And these are rooted in foundational relationship principles that we teach.
Yeah.
First off, AI will never build a relationship. And it's interesting how the people who are creating AI and teaching it how to learn and these different things, um, they're actually putting things in to trick our brains to get the dopamine hit to make us feel like we're building a relationship. And so there's even been cases of people who are already mentally ill being sucked into the AI vortex and believing that they've got this relationship with basically something that does math. It's like it's things. So first off, uh, as a leader, as a coach, our number one priority is to build relationships. And so we use AI as a tool to help us find the right people to build relationships with, and then to give us more time to actually build that relationship. Right. So that's the second is AI will never have wisdom, and it'll have a lot of knowledge,
Right.
a lot of data. Not all of it you can trust, right? Because there's different inputs and things like that, and different worldviews and different slants that come into it.
Right.
But but when you think of wisdom, wisdom is experience and knowledge applied through virtue, right? It's the virtues that guide us. And so as leaders and as owners, business owners, as coaches, or whatever we do, we our differentiator is the wisdom we bring into that situation. And the third one is really, to me, the biggest one of all, because I'll just ask a question, and if you're listening to this, just kind of raise your hand in your car or wherever you're listening to it. Nobody will care. Uh, have you ever done more than you thought you could because someone else believed you could?
Yes.
Yeah. And so that was really Dad's superpower. Is he would make you believe you could do more than you thought you could, and he would back it up intellectually and emotionally with evidence and examples and stories, and it would resonate. And so then people would set a goal for the first time, or they would do in sales, they would try a different question for the first time, or they would say, why not get in shape for the first time, right? And so they would suddenly do something they hadn't done before because somebody else believed they could. And so the third thing that AI will never do is AI will never believe in you. I mean, think about it. You put a prompt in and it says, "Oh, what a wise and thoughtful question you've just put in." Right? I mean, we've all seen it, the response, right? And we know it's just gaming us. We know it's just messing with us. And so ultimately, I think the greatest thing we can do as a mom or a dad, as a friend, as an owner, as a leader, as a coach, is we build that relationship with somebody, our child, our coworker, uh, our client, and then we share wisdom with them, and then we believe in them, right? We transfer that belief. We say that coaching is a transference of confidence. Even the Gallup organization, they just did a poll, and they polled tens of thousands of employees, and they said, "What do you value most in a leader?" And it came back with two qualities that they wanted. And it's interesting. The first one was hope. I want my leader to provide hope.
Wow.
And trust. I want to be able to trust my leader. Okay. So hope is a belief thing, right? It's I'm I'm in the right place, working for the right organization. It's very close to vision. I'm making a difference, and I have hope that I matter. And so that hope wouldn't be there if that leader didn't believe in them,
No.
right? And then the trust is, well, who do I trust? Well, trust is a byproduct of integrity,
Yeah.
right? And so how can you build a relationship without trust? You can't,
No.
right? It's the number one thing. And so what does the Gallup poll say? It says, well, gosh, we need somebody, we need hope, we need somebody to believe in us, and we need trust, which takes relationship and wisdom, right? Because
Yeah.
wisdom comes from the virtues. And by the way, I, I wrote a book that came out at the end of 2021 called 10 Leadership Virtues for Disruptive Times. And
Yes. It's behind you. I see it.
yeah, there it is. What are the virtues that I really emphasize is humility, because if you don't have humility, you're unteachable,
Yeah.
right? Because the opposite is pride or arrogance, which means I know everything.
Mm.
Okay, so humility it's counterintuitive. That's like the greatest thing that leaders have, is that ability. And so when you enter into a relationship with humility, saying, what can I learn from this person on my team? I'm leading them. I got to build trust. I've got to install hope and cast a vision, and I need to believe in them. But if you enter into that with humility, the prospects for that relationship going to the level it needs to go to is just phenomenal. And so all of these things, all these virtues and values that we just talked about, and the importance of relationship and character and integrity, that's what we've been doing for 60 plus years.
60 plus years. Yeah.
Yeah. So that never changes. And what's interesting is, if you look at the consequences of this highly noisy AI driven world,
Right.
what you see is isolation, and there is no trust. I mean, we see it in the news networks and in social media. There is intentional polarization. It's like my feed just gives me more of what I already believe, but it agitates me further right or further left.
Yeah.
And it's intentional, because that if we can be agitated one way or the other, then we're easy to monetize.
Yeah.
I know what to sell you. And if I know what you believe, then I can control you. Right.
This
And
is
so
major problem, right? One of the quotes that your father, you know it better than I do. I was trying to find it, but it's a quote that I use in my presentations often to explain how marketing works, actually. But he says, every person in the world actually wants to have relationships, a little bit of money, etc. And then he says, and hope that tomorrow is going to be better than today, right? So what you just mentioned with hope, if there's no hope and if there's no trust, we are in a dire situation. So, referring back to what you just mentioned with the news and with the politics and with the polarization, I think we all see that, even in Europe, but also in the US and worldwide, we see division. We just had the murder on Charlie Kirk, and this has stirred up a whole situation in your country as well. And I don't know how you look at it, but it seems like, sometimes that it's great to have a memorial service for somebody who just was killed. At the same time, we must be careful, I think, that it's not bringing even more division. So it's I was laying awake this night about this whole thing, because I was watching back the memorial, And I thought it sometimes it seems so complex, our world, right? And sometimes it seems like we either have to be for something or against something. And how do you look at this situation? We haven't really prepared this question, but since you brought up the news, it made me think of, all these pro and cons, and so in a world where truth is so much, I'm not against Charlie Kirk or anything, but sometimes, whereas how can we make sure that we, just like you started this conversation with your father, we are walking the walk in love with every person, no matter their background, no matter their religion? How can we stop the division?
Yeah. And I would say at this moment in time, at least in the United States, and maybe even the Western world, the number one challenge or issue that's creating fear, anxiety, worry, concern, division, uh, is this whole idea of how do we discern the truth?
Mm,
Like, what is true? I mean,
right.
that's it. Um, and I've actually am writing a program called Be the Light, which is a program on how to discern the truth. And so I'll give you some fundamentals on that. Um, the first is I love this ancient Jewish tradition, and the the tradition is the rabbis from different sects would get together and they would argue the scripture with each other, and these would be you know pretty big arguments. Um, and then when they were done, they would spend the night at each other's houses because they would travel. They would eat together. Their kids would play together and be best friends. And so the point is they weren't arguing to win the argument. They were arguing to discover the truth.
Mm,
And so we clearly live in a politicized world of people arguing to win the argument. And that's not genuine. So and and so then as a believer, as personally as a Christ follower, and so kind of a definition on that, because you hear the name Christian or these different titles, and you have an assumption, and then you see how that person lives, and there's a disconnect, right? Because there's not consistency in what that name should mean and the way that person lives.
right.
And so talking about the assassination of Charlie Kirk and the memorial service, and watching good pieces of it, a Christ follower, which is what I am, is if Christ said it, I do my best to follow it. And so this is really interesting. Um, my value comes from my creator, not my beliefs, not what I do. And that is a different position than people in the world, because the world is very transactional. Your value is what you do
Mm,
or what you have. And so when somebody comes to me and challenges a belief that I don't have a crisis of identity. I suddenly go, well, what if they're right? And then I take the challenge against my belief, and I go back to Christ's words and what he said. And I say, does this line up? Because my responsibility is, as a Christ follower, is to be in alignment with God's word.
Right.
Right. And it doesn't change Christ's word. It doesn't, that person still has that belief, and they're coming to me and saying, you're wrong to think that way. So now I review it. And so let's just say that I'm confident in my belief, and we now have two different beliefs. So the first question I ask myself is, does God or Christ, according to his own word, love that other person any less because of that belief that's contrary to what Christ said? Well, the answer is no. Loves them the same. So, what should I do? Well, how should I respond to them? Well, maybe I should respond to them the way Christ responds to me.
Yeah.
Right? So I should love them anyway. Right? And so if I'm to love them anyway, that kind of prohibits me from personal attacks, vile rhetoric, or anything. Now, we're going very deep spiritually, but and so there's this battle going on in the world, and I call it the battle between we'll call it truth and justice and grace and mercy. Okay, we see it every day. And so the story in the Bible that I love is when the religious leaders brought the prostitute, the woman caught in adultery, to Jesus. And they're trying to trap Jesus. And they say to him, Rabbi or Master, I can't remember the exact term, but it was a little bit sarcastic. And they said, we caught this woman in adultery. What should we do? Because the Old Testament law was stone her. Right.
Yeah.
And so in the passage, Jesus looks at them, bends over, writes something in the dirt. Nobody knows what he wrote. People have speculated that maybe he wrote that he sins that they had done that only they would know. And he says, he who is without sin cast the first stone. So they leave. They melt away. And then Jesus looks at the woman and says, none of them condemn you, and neither do I. And that's the deepest grace, right? That is the deepest grace. And then Jesus says, now go and sin no more. What is that? That's the highest standard. That's the truth. And so what the world is missing is that we can offer the deepest grace without compromising the highest standard. And as business owners, I teach this all the time to leaders, is when you have a business, your goal should be to have the highest standard. We're going to operate in the highest standard possible. If you have no standard, it means that you're going to go out of business because nobody can exist, right? So we should always be there to raise our standards. But you know what we do? Who we do business with? People. And people make mistakes. And so we got to give the deepest grace. And so what does the deepest grace mean? It means that when someone of good intentions makes a mistake, we forgive them. And of course, if they make you know, the wrong kind of mistake, something that's contrary to our mission, vision, and values, or they keep making the same mistake over and over again, it simply means they're not a fit for your business. But we give them that grace. We don't lower the standard, and so they still fit, right? The standard is the standard. The truth is the truth. And so the challenge is that people, you can go to Chat GPT and check this out. The truth cannot contradict itself. And so one of the things that we've been told is that there's a such thing as personal truth, which is can't be. It's a contradiction. There are personal beliefs and there are personal opinions, but there is only truth, because truth cannot contradict itself. And so this is a pretty weighty thing. So the problem with, it's like, if you're going to discern the truth, there is a very analytical, logical process that you go through.
Right.
Right. And that's something that we're going to teach in this course, is how do we go through that? And there are also biases that everybody brings to the table. It's just, like I said, my bias. I'm a Christ follower, and I just gave you my position on it. If you are agnostic or atheist or a different faith or not sure, you're going to come in with your own bias, right? We both have bias, and so we should both acknowledge up front. But one of the things that I can do is, if we have beliefs that contradict each other, one of the assumptions that I could make is I could make that I could choose to believe that you really believe that your belief is on the side of right and good.
Yeah.
Like you really believe that. And that's going to allow me to encounter this thing. And so, but the opening thing is can we sit down to discover the truth together?
Powerful.
And then let's go through this process that allows us to get there. It doesn't mean we're going to agree at the end. And so when I see a memorial service and I hear Erica say something that she's thought about it and she's forgiven the assassin for murdering her husband, because that's what Christ would do. And that's what Charlie would do. That in and of itself is a world-changing concept.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
And so the challenge of our time is, it's not, if you're on this, and I'll just, for everybody listening, if you're on the side of right, you also have the responsibility to do it in the right way.
Yeah.
Because you kind of invalidate your position if you do it in the wrong way.
Yeah.
And so many on, just say, the right side will say, yeah, but now you're compromising the truth. You don't have to. You don't have to. So love, kindness, humility, respect. Wow, these are all incredible virtues. And this was Dad's power on stage. Is
Right.
he told people he was a Christ follower. And so many people, because of my dad's influence, decided to become Christ followers. Why? because they wanted what he had. And so we need to position ourselves to where people want what we have. He made the case for what we believe so strongly that people wanted it.
Yeah.
And it was never to downmount or criticize somebody else's faith or lack of faith or position.
Right.
That's right. Now, there's another, like as a Christ follower, what's my responsibility? Because I've been given the hot potato question, right? You're speaking to a group and you're talking about a principle, and then somebody says, "What about this?"
Yeah.
And it's like, wow, do I have to answer that question in front of
Yeah.
this room?
Yeah.
Right. And all I can say is this: my responsibility is to give you an answer that will allow you to have the best chance for success.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's probably not going to match what the culture is telling you. But I know that this approach gives you the best chance for success.
Wow.
Are you okay with me sharing that with you? And that's where we got to come in on. And so I mean, honestly, with the memorial for Charlie Kirk, amazing, life-changing messages in there, and also disappointing politics by some.
Yeah.
So as a viewer, I mean, I would encourage anybody to watch it. And your bias will tell you which way you lean.
Yeah.
Because we're programmed. But I would sit back and say, you know, this is for Christ followers. This is the time to take the higher road.
Yeah.
And to lead with grace and to uncompromisingly stand for the truth.
Yeah.
But dad, I said, Dad, you know, how do you judge a talk? And this is what he told me. So he would get a speech, right? And he would get standing ovations. Like 10,000 people would stand up 2 or 3 times during his talk. And I said, Dad, that was amazing. How did you do? How do you think you did? And he said, Son, I never judge my presentation by the response of the audience. And I said, really? And he said, yeah. I judge it on 2 things. Did I prepare enough with the time I had? Right? Was I ready? And then the second one was, did I speak the truth in love?
Wow.
And why is that so powerful? Because as a Christ follower, when you speak the truth in love, not as a hammer, right, but in love, then what that person does with it is between them and God. Because all we can control is what we can control, which is how we present it.
Yeah.
And then what they do with it is between them and God.
Yeah.
Right.
Your
And
father,
so the
your
wor-
father didn't really seem to have enemies, right? Because of this.
It always amazed me that he could say the most quote unquote politically incorrect things, and people loved him even more.
Yeah.
Because they knew the place from where it was coming.
Yeah.
It was never, I'm right, you're wrong. It was always, this changed my life. And I think it I th- I think it'll give you the best chance for the life you've always wanted.
Wow.
Now, he did have people who would attack him and things like that, but not not on a scale that we see today. I mean, so he had and I don't know if it was his quote or not. He said, "You can disagree without being disagreeable."
Yeah. Nice.
And
I like that.
and so yeah, and so today what we get is sound bites and snippets, and you know, like headlines,
Right. Right.
and so one of the things from a discernment perspective is what's the context? Is that the whole statement? Is that the whole presentation?
Right.
And we shouldn't pass judgment on that. And then we should be extra careful when somebody on our side makes a statement that makes us rejoice because it's so true, but that statement is said in a rhetorical way to dehumanize or discredit personally the
Yeah.
other side.
Yeah. Do you think
Right.
so? This is so powerful, Tom. Thank you for taking the time to share this because I believe this is the talks we need to have more, right? Just the example of the rabbis not trying to make a point, but trying to understand each other. Um, do you believe that the times have changed? And if your father, Zig Ziglar, would still be alive, it would be different now? Or do we need more of those virtues in the time we're in, right? Is it one or the other? Of course, times have changed, but what your father did, does it still work? Does it still apply to us? Should we just, if we do what Zig Ziglar was telling in his books, that "See You at the Top" and "Born to Win," the last book, I think the 30th book that he wrote together with you. Um, how do you look at this? Because it's, if sometimes you almost think that if he would still be alive, if he would be transferred from time into a stadium like a Tony Robbins kind of big event, what would happen? Would he be stoned to death, or would he be loved and cheered because of?
Um, well, I'm convinced because he did go into every part of the country with different bents and political beliefs, conservative, liberal, whatever, and he was loved everywhere. Um, but here's a story. So this is like 30 years ago, and Dad passed away 13 years ago. So 30 years ago, the big circuit. So he's speaking 30 times a year to stadiums, 10 to 20,000 people. And there were these three young speakers. You even know their names now, if I told you their names. And they followed Dad at different venues. And at the third time they heard him, they were talking to him back in the green room. And one of them said, "Zig, every time we go and speak to companies and groups, we create a new speech based on that group. Every time you speak, it's like 95% the same. How do you get away with that?" And so Dad answered them and said, "The truth never changes." So what do people need now more than ever? Hope and
Yeah.
encouragement.
Yeah.
That's what people need,
Yeah.
right? The world has changed because it is harder and harder to discern the truth. There's so many competing things.
Mm-hmm.
I'm reading a book and it says we're being discipled by the internet. There is no alone time with with our thoughts. It's like constant bombardment,
Yeah.
and it's deliberative. You're an expert in marketing and copywriting and what moves people and what the formula is. That's being weaponized, not for our good,
No.
by many, many organizations. But there are also many groups who are using that for our good.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
And so again, it's a tool. It's how we're wired. It's how we're created. It's how we make choices and decisions.
Right.
And so we've got to have the discernment. The number one lesson I learned from my dad was, and I put it in my little quote, which is, what you feed your mind determines your appetite.
Mm. Yeah.
And so if we want to start with discernment, we've got to be very careful about what we put into our mind,
Yes.
because it's going to determine what we want next.
Yeah.
And right now we've abdicated that responsibility to our social media feed.
Very powerful.
Somebody else.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. Somebody else, for their own reasons, are choosing what we get to see.
Yeah. Yeah, it's dangerous for our children as well. What you see is what you want. Maybe it's a good time to show the viewer and to have the listener listen to your father speak. So you and I have decided that we're going to show something of your father in this podcast for those who don't know. And let's have a look right now.
In times of change, the learners shall inherit the earth, while the learned find themselves beautifully equipped to deal with a world that no longer exists. For over 30 years, I've read an average of 3 hours a day. Read my Bible every day, read the paper every day. That way I know what both sides are up to. And I just happen to believe that is very, very important. When you start looking at all of these things, when you become a constant student, that's when your growth is more substantial. And your motivation and your inspiration and your knowledge. And here's been one of my most interesting discoveries, and I've now written a book on it. It won't be out for quite a little while yet, but how to develop a creative imagination. The more you know about anything, the more creative you become when you add additional information to that. When I wrote Secrets of Closing the Sale, which is the first book and only book as a manual on how the processes that you follow in sales, only book in New York Times, first time in that category that ever reached the bestseller stage. Now, what happened was very important. When I read that book, when I had 98% of it written, somebody sent me a little short 3-paragraph summation. And what this little 3-paragraph said was, this is the heart of the sale. It was 3 short paragraphs. I read those 3 paragraphs and I added 50 pages to the book. I'd been selling since I was 8, been sales training since I was 21. I knew a lot about sales. The new information revolutionized a whole lot of things. Keep on growing. It helps a whole lot of people. When you talk about relationships, Harvard Business Class in 1949, almost a little over 49% of all of the graduates, a study was done on them, and this class of 1949, 49% of them were at least vice presidents in major corporations. When asked how they accounted for that, and CNN did a telecast on these men, they said, well, number one, our wives were supportive. Their careers were built on integrity. They were risk takers, but they did not, they were not gamblers. What do we do at our company? How many of the things do we teach and what do I teach that are so important to me as I'm talking about it now? Our mission statement includes a big frying pan to be the difference maker in the personal, family, professional, and spiritual lives of enough people to make a positive difference in the world. That's a pretty audacious mission statement, ladies and gentlemen, but it's got to be built on character. Are we being successful in that? Well, over 40 languages of what I've been teaching have been printed and used. We've got several information bits that really have made a difference in the lives of other people. In short, with 40 translations of our work in different languages, we're reaching an awful lot of people. Now, we teach things that are generally not taught in school, as I already have said, but I want to talk about another little factor. 90% of the visits to medical doctors are directly or indirectly related to stress. 90%. If we can reduce stress, and incidentally, the same process that reduces stress is exactly the same process that will enable you to have a long-term balanced career. My stress level, and I face as many deadlines as anybody you know. It's always a book production, a class I'm teaching, a seminar I'm presenting, and each one of them requires time and concentration. Example, how many of you feel like I've made this talk before? Can I see your hand, please? Several hundred times. I made it yesterday. You know what I did between yesterday and today? I spent over 6 hours getting ready for today. You see, I think it would be arrogant if I thought I could stand up and spit it out just because I did it yesterday or hundreds of times. That's arrogance. That's when Buster Douglas knocks out Mike Tyson. That's when an expansion team in Houston beats an established NFL team in Dallas. I dare not. Look at the people here, several thousand. I'm taking over an hour. That's several thousand hours of time. Where would my integrity be if I came here unprepared to make something, a presentation that could make a difference in your life? There is no way. You got to prepare for it, ladies and gentlemen. When stress does hit you, how many of you will admit that after 9/11, maybe you had a little stress? Can I see your hands, please? All right. Let me tell you something, folks. If you take the word stressed and spell it backwards, it's desserts. When you respond to life instead of react to it, react is negative. You get sick, go to the doctor, she gives you a prescription, says, see me tomorrow. You walk in the next day, she said, uh-oh, it's not working. We have to change the prescription. You get a little nervous. But if she smiled and said, hey, it's working. And so she's just responded, and you feel better because now you see some real hope in order to get ahead in life. But I don't care how optimistic you are, and incidentally, for what it's worth, I am an optimist. I'd take my last $2 and buy a money belt with it. I mean, that's the way I'm put together. I'd go after Moby Dick in a rowboat and take the tartar sauce with me. Your optimism is an important fact of life.
All right, and now we're back. One of the things that you just shared, I would like to get back to that a little bit. Your father's life was an epic story of turning thinking, as he mentioned it, into soaring success. You are his son. You are the CEO carrying the torch, which you do extremely well. It's amazing how the Ziglar brand, well, actually, you know, maybe you can share that story of how, because you and your sisters, you know, inherited this company. And then at a certain moment, you have to make choices. How do you carry on this legacy? You don't want to have the Ziglar Corporation go out like a night torch. You want it to be a light shining bright on a hill. How did you do that? Because this also, we talked a lot about your father, but let's talk about you. I mean, how did you get the Ziglar Corporation ready for the next generation?
Yeah. So Dad passed away 13 years ago, almost, and at the age of 86. So for 20 years before that, really in his late 60s, is when we started thinking about legacy. So I've had legacy on my mind for 30 plus years. And so the challenge for us is that when you have a personality based business, which is marketing gold, there is no reason to do anything other than to build around that. Because of his incredible impact and the volume of work. It's now 45 books have been released. Like 9 have come out since he passed away.
Wow.
And these are just audio transcripts of speeches and presentations, right? And so one of the things that Dad told me and my sisters is he said, you'll never know true freedom until I'm gone. And we had no idea what he meant. And then, as much as you prepare for it, when somebody is, is day to day and impactful and important as he was in our lives, when he passes away, it's like you see things differently, even though you've been planning it and preparing, not planning for that day, but just thinking, how are we going to do things differently? And then it became really true and understanding, because we had spent our life supporting him, setting the stage for him, marketing around him, productizing and making into curriculums and programs his works, right? His books became training programs and courses and seminars and workshops and events and all these things, right? But based on his voice, based on him out there creating the energy. And so now he's gone.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so we had each taken our own natural gifts and talents and muted them, except for when it supported the bigger mission.
Wow.
Okay. So now he's gone.
Mm.
And so now the question is, okay, so how do we keep this message going?
Right.
And the realization is, well, none of us can be Dad. None of us can be Zig Ziglar. None of us can. And if I try to speak emulating the style, right, the physical movement, the humor, the pause, the voice inflection, everything that made that, people will know instantly that that's not me. Right?
You're
Even
not
if
from,
I get really good.
You're not from Alabama.
I know. I'm a nerd, right? I've got a whole different thing. And so the first thing that happened is you got to dig into the gifts and talents of the people on the team that are there right then. So even in a typical business, if you've got a normal business and you're passing it to the next generation is going to have a different skill set than the founder, right? And so the founder's mistake is trying to make the heirs run it the way they ran it. And so what we decided to do is we tried to say that these are the principles and values and the mission of the business. That has not changed. But the way we do the business and how we market it has to change, because we're not the same. Right? So if you have a founder who's the inventor, maybe the son or the daughter is an expert marketer. Well, you got to let them flourish in their skill.
Yeah.
Rather than try to become the inventor, because, right. So the same with us. And so what we decided to do was to get help. We needed to find speakers, trainers, and coaches and business owners who wanted to take the Ziglar philosophy to their own community.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's what we've done. And then I've kind of found what I like to speak on, which is I love to speak on the core Ziglar philosophy, the wheel of life, and things that we do. But I really like speaking specifically to coaches and aspiring coaches, people who feel a calling to go and do that. because of the coaching programs that we have, and then also to leaders,
Yeah.
because we teach a very specific leadership approach, which is what we call coach leadership, and it's a leadership style. It's similar to servant leadership, but how you walk it out is very intentional, and it's around a coaching model, right? Because if you think about this, what do coaches do? They ask questions. And so if I tell you what to do, your buy-in to that isn't going to be as great as if I ask you what you think you should do and why.
Yeah.
And then together we co-create a plan
Yes.
that you've built yourself, that attracts you to your higher purpose individually and is alignment with the company's goals and revenue and all that stuff, right?
I love that.
If I can help you achieve your dreams through success in your role at the business, while you're succeeding in your role and the company is accelerating, I don't have to motivate you anymore, right? Because you're motivated because the harder you work, the faster you get your dreams. And so now I'm just reminding you of your dreams. And so that's the path we've chosen. But the hard part was, if we decided to try to create Zig Point 2, trying to just do it the way Dad did it, it never worked.
No.
And so, and this is truly one of those questions where what's good is often the barrier to what's great.
Yeah.
Because we had so many good things we were doing, but the person to lead those good things, they're gone.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so now we gotta, if we want to go to great, we got to let go of some good to focus on the great.
It's this constant elevation. I love this. Thank you for sharing that. Now, at StoryBrand, you know that we're all about clarifying the narrative to connect with audiences. Zig was a master at it. I've seen you at work with on stages with audiences. You're good at it in your own right. You really, you said, I'm a nerd, but you know, the way and style that you speak and found your own voice, but still with these same principles, is very powerful too. So you inspire to action, whether in sales, whether in life, whether in business. Can you share a favorite story your dad told that stuck with you and how you've used storytelling at Ziglar Inc. to keep inspiring people today? Because you're a master storyteller in your own right. You know, I was just referring back to this week in the Netherlands. I just remember story after story after story. You know, if I picked you up from the hotel, even before we had breakfast, you would say, Don, let me tell you a story, right? So how important is this to you and how do you use it?
Yeah. So I love Dad's personal story of all. And no matter what position you play in a business, whether you're the leader on the team, you speak on stage, you never speak. This story concept is the game changer. I remember years ago, this is like 20 years ago, I'm meeting with Dan Kennedy, and Dan Kennedy is a famous marketer, copywriter. And he says to me, do you know why so many people love your dad? And I said, I don't know, tell me. And he says, it's the same reason that women like soap operas. And I'm like, tell me more. And he said, women fall in love with the characters in soap operas because they know everything about them. They know their fears. They know what makes them angry. They know the trauma they've had in their life, the challenges they've overcome, their victories, what their secret dreams and hopes are. And so Dad's gift is when he had more than an hour, he would tell his story. And he would talk about, being born in LA, Lower Alabama, and that's very rural, right? And then he moved to Yazoo City, Mississippi, and which is Mississippi is one of the poorest states. And Yazoo City is a little town. So, and this was during the Great Depression. And so now you get this picture. He's painting this picture of who he was. He was the 10th of 12 children. And his dad died when he was 5. He had to start work when he was 6. And so you're starting to go in your mind, wait a second, this Zig Ziglar who I see on stage, who's got all this clout and influence and success. He grew up basically seeing a dirt floor between the floorboards of his house, having to work at 6. And he bought every stitch of clothing that he owned since he was 12 with the money that he earned. And then he never did well in school. He was in the part of the class that made the top half possible, right? So he's telling his story. He's getting people to laugh. And then he goes into the Navy at the very end of World War II. And he becomes a Navy pilot. And he's just starting to go through that training. Never flew, actually, because the war ended. He meets my mom. He's 18. She's 16. They get married 2 years later. And he goes to work. And he gets a job selling. And for 2.5 years, he didn't sell anything. Well, he did. He sold his car. He sold his furniture. Right?
Yeah.
And so he's painting this picture of how hard it was. And then a man named P.C. Merrill, he goes to a meeting, and P.C. Merrill was a legend in the business. He was somebody that everybody looked up to. And at the break, P.C. Merrill comes over to my dad, puts his hands on his shoulders. So here's Dad, mid-20s. And P.C. Merrill looks at my dad and says, Zig, in all my years, I've never seen such a waste. But, so remember the but erases everything before it. But if you believed in yourself and went to work on a regular schedule, you could be a champion. And so that year, that's what Dad committed to. What does it mean to believe in yourself? And what does going to work on a regular schedule mean? So that's when Dad started studying every single day. What does it mean to believe in yourself? So Norman Vincent Peale and all the people that were ahead of him that he started studying. And then he made a commitment to be knocking on the door every morning at 9 a.m. because he was in direct sales. And back then you actually went door to door and knocked on the door. That year, he finished number 2 out of 7,000 salespeople. And in the previous 2.5 years, he never ranked in the top 5,000. He didn't know any scripts any better. He didn't know the product any better. He didn't know how to handle objections any better. The only 2 things that he did different was he raised his understanding and his belief in himself, and he went to work on a regular schedule.
Wow.
And so this is what happens when you tell that story. The people in the room who didn't know Dad, they're in a room of 10,000 people, and they're like, wow, I hope this Zig Ziglar guy is good. And then he comes out and he starts speaking, and they're like, wow, he's pretty funny. Like, wow, look at him. He knows how to speak. I'm kind of getting excited. And in the back of their mind, they're thinking, yeah, but that's him. I could never be Zig Ziglar. I mean, look at him. He's in the green room. He probably belongs to the country club. He knows all the rich and famous people. If you're already there, it's easy, but I could never do that. And then he tells his story. And in their brain, they go, well, maybe if Zig can, I can.
Mm.
And so they shift because did you lose your dad when you were 5? Did you have to go to work when you were 6? Did you struggle your whole life? And, until this PC Merrill spoke into you? And then did you do the roller coaster like this until this happened? And so what happened was by sharing his story, hope was born.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
And so that's the lesson for everybody here is if you
Bless you.
is when you tell your story with the mistakes and the failures and the hard times woven in, people now identify with you.
Yeah.
And they are more likely to take action on something you recommend. Right?
And that's where it's all about.
Yeah. The problem is you get a scientific expert who's got 27 degrees behind their name and you're trying to market something they have. You got to make them human. Right? It's like they have to tell their story of how they dealt with that problem and it was crushing their life. And that's what inspired them to dig deeper and how they put this stuff together. Because if you're just the egghead expert and you're writing in 10-syllable words, then I don't identify with that. So I'm not taking action.
Yeah. And that's the power of story.
Yeah. And so in the audio series, Born to Win, I think Dad says 7 times, I have been in your shoes.
Wow. Very powerful.
And that's ultimately, so let's put together what we said at the beginning and what we're saying now. Would you say, I have been in your shoes, which is that story of identity? And then you build hope, and then you say, I believe in you. The thought turns to choice, and the choice turns to action, and action gets the result.
Yes.
So that's how story is everything.
Very powerful, Tom. I want to thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be with us, to share this. We will put the link to the website in the show notes, and please let us know when your new program arrives. But for now, where do we send people if they want to know more about you and your beautiful company, your programs, your books, whatever? Where do you want to, what call to action would you like to share?
Yeah, so I'm going to give everybody 2 calls to action here. Ziglar.com is our website with all the stuff on it. But I also want to give you my email address. And my email is tom@ziglar.com. And the reason is we got pretty deep in there about what's going on in the world. And if you have questions about that, like how can you lead your people in these trying times in a better way? Or maybe, I'd love it. You can write and say, hey, I loved what you said. I agree with it 100%. Or, hey, I just got a question. I'm not sure that this is true. Send it over. Because that's ultimately what it's about, is to discover the truth, to discern the truth. And that's the time that we're in.
Yeah.
And so think about it. If we're convinced we cannot know the truth, we are perpetually paralyzed into a place that has no power.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but we can discern it.
Yes, we can. Thank you so much for sharing it. Please say hello to everybody over there. And I would say, I think we're going to get a lot of response on this podcast since we covered so much powerful stories, lessons, truths, opinions in some people's eyes, and that's great. So I just want to thank you, Tom. It's been great talking to you for an hour and listening to you extensively.
All right. Thanks, brother. I appreciate you. We need to go. We need to go practice our cow placement.
Yeah, we need to. Love it. Yeah.
All right.
Thank you. And if they want to know what we meant by that, they have to send the message too, right? All right.
Yes.
Wonderful. And it made me think of this joke back in the car on the last day before I drove you to the airport, where you were talking with Howard Partridge in the car about how you both spoke. And you said to him, because he asked you, how did you speak? And you said something like, yeah, you did well. You made me think of this cross-eyed discus thrower. You remember that one?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then so the next sentence is something, well, you know it better than I do.
Yeah. So yeah, you made me think of the cross-eyed discus thrower. You didn't set any records, but you did keep the crowd alert.
Yeah, it made me laugh. That's one of the times I've laughed so hard that I had to try to stop laughing because I was driving a car. That was wonderful.
Oh,
Yeah.
that was awesome.
Awesome. Well, thank you. See you next time.
All right, brother. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Around the turn of the century, down in South Texas, just outside of Beaumont, there was a farmer selling much of his land. He was having to sell it simply because times were so tough. He couldn't feed his family. One day an oil company representative came along and said, "Sir, we think there might be oil on your property. Let us drill for it, and if we discover any, we'll pay you royalties on every barrel that we pump out." Well, he had nothing to lose, a great deal to gain, so he said, "Let's do it." Well, they drilled for the oil, and in those days, the derricks were made out of wood. And when they had a gusher, the gusher literally destroyed the derrick. And the greater the destruction, the greater the excitement, because that meant an abundance of oil underneath. When this oil well came in, it literally obliterated the derrick. And before they could cap it, over 100,000 barrels of oil had flowed out. It was the world's introduction to Spindletop, the most productive oil well in history. 3 oil companies came out of that field. The man became an instant millionaire. Or did he? The reality is he'd been a multi-millionaire ever since he had acquired the property. But until they drilled for the oil, discovered it, brought it to the surface, and took it to the marketplace, it really had no value. I found a lot of people pretty much that way. They've got an awful lot underneath the surface, but until they bring it out and take it to the marketplace, they will never realize even a minute fraction of the benefits that they could bring themselves, their families, their friends, their community, and everyone else. The purpose of Strategies for Success is to share with you, how do we discover the oil? How do we bring it to the surface? How do we take it to the marketplace? How can we learn to be so that we can do, and do so that we can have? I don't know how many of you remember or recognize the name Howard Hill. Now, Howard Hill was a good Alabama boy. He was an archer. They say he was the best in the whole world. He entered 287 archery tournaments. He placed first 287 times. He was so good, he retired early because the other archers started to get unwilling to compete for second place. I've seen newsreels of Howard Hill where from 50 feet away, he had split an arrow dead center in the bullseye. Then he would take the next arrow and split the first one. He killed a Cape buffalo with a bow and arrow, the most difficult game animal alive to bring down. He killed a Bengal tiger. He killed a 15-foot shark in under 18 feet of water. Or was it an 18-foot shark under 15 feet of water? Well, it was a great big one and his way down there. I do know that. He was a good one, there's no question. So now let me emphasize a point. I've never shot the bow and arrow professionally, but I'm an instructor extraordinary. I'm not certain, but I think that's French, which means I'm really good at it. As a matter of fact, let me tell you just how good I am as a teacher. If I could spend 30 minutes with any man or woman who will ever view this, providing your eyesight is good and your health is normal, at the end of 30 minutes, I would have you hitting the bullseye more consistently than Howard Hill could hit it on the best day he ever had. Sound like I'm bragging, but I'm not. I could do it. Provided, of course, you had first blindfolded Howard Hill and turn him around a couple of times so he wouldn't have a clue as, which way am I headed? And you might say, well, now, Ziglar, my goodness alive, fella, of course you could. That's ridiculous. How on earth could a person possibly hit a target he couldn't even see? It's a good question, but here's a better one. How can you hit a target you don't have? Did you write it down? Did you list the benefits which come your way from having a goal? You know, so many times people say, well, I do this, but man alive, it hurt, it cost too much money, or it take too long, or whatever. I quit smoking, but you know, I'd gain 47 pounds or whatever, or I'd go back to college and get my degree. But you know, it'd take me 10 years, and in 10 years I'd be 45. Well, how old would you be in 10 years if you didn't go back to college and get a degree? But instead of that, what you need to do is you set your goal is identify the benefits. Why do I want to do this? Then you identify the obstacles which you've got to overcome. Did you spell out the skills and knowledge required? Did you identify the people, the groups, and organizations to work with? Did you work out a plan of action? And did you set that date? You see, there's a formula. And the formula, and incidentally for the date, you can't set a date on a lot of things. If it's applicable, you do. But for example, when do you finish education? You don't, do you? Now you can finish school. You can even make it easy. But you never finish your education. When you answer these questions, if you answered any of them with a no, I didn't do that, then what you've got is not a goal. It's still a dream. And that dream has got to have some foundation to it.